Left in Kentucky, the podcast of Indivisible, Northern Kentucky. Welcome back to Left in Kentucky. This is Roberto Henriquez.
And Dickerson.
And we are so glad to be back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have a special guest today.
We do have a special guest today. Joining us today
is
Matt Lehman.
Oh my God.
Hi there.
House Representative, District
67.
67.
Representative-elect.
Yep, Representative-elect. Very important, Representative-elect, 67. Yeah. And for those who don't know, that was Rachel Roberts' old district,
yep.
Right? And so thanks for joining us. Really appreciate that.
I'm really happy to be here.
Cool. So I think the most important question I know I have on my mind is, what committees are you on?
I told you no gotcha questions. Yes. So I get sworn in 9 days from now, and I do not know what committee assignments are yet. I don't have an email, an assistant, an office. So I'm hoping this comes soon.
Great. So
that supermajority is right on top of everything now.
They are a little over a week away.
I'm well prepared to. I have, I do have an intern.
So
I'm
good.
very excited about that.
Excellent.
We got to talk. He's from Campbell County. Goes to U of L. So.
Oh, great.
Nice.
Yeah,
very nice.
So we both don't know what we're doing yet.
So you have been to orientation, right?
I have been to orientation.
How was that kind of?
It was informative. Learned how to file a bill and just the processes, and learned had hours of legislative ethics, and it's like I said, it's shocking when you've done something, they have to put a slide at an ethics training. You got to rethink your life choices, I would say. But there were a lot of slides, and
one of these days we should get a hold of that deck and
right.
go through the deck and be like, okay, who did this that this required this slide?
That would be a good book. Yeah.
Right. Or turn it into a bingo game.
Yeah. Maybe our YouTube, we could do a video on it. We could do like an animation recreating.
Right? That'd be awesome. Oh my God. It's like you said, I just sit here and think, what do you have to do
to get a slide?
To get a slide. Yeah. I mean, at some point, does it become a competition?
Do not take your intern out binge drinking. Really? I'm glad they did a slide for that, because that was on my to-do list. Oh, sorry, Matt.
These are my soon-to-be colleagues. So.
Excellent. So they talk you through how to file a bill. Is that like really difficult, or?
No. We got to spend a lot of time understanding the LRC, Legislative Research Commission, which I will say the professionalism of this organization in Kentucky, it really has surpassed my expectations. I mean, they're well organized, well staffed. People are great. Mm-hmm. Even some of the bill requests I've filed already. I mean, they're assigned quickly.
Nice.
Very professional.
Yeah, we've talked about the LRC before, about how it's in Kentucky. It's different from some other places where there's this independent group that handles the legislative work.
Yeah, and they handle both the Senate and the House, which I think is helpful, especially if there's bills on both sides. Of, so you really have people that know.
Yeah,
they approached very, very professionally, and so that was very impressive.
Cool.
And it's very clear that the LRC or the legislative assistant I will be assigned, but who's yet to be assigned, is also very professional.
You'll get one by the end of January. We promise.
I'm sure something will happen soon.
Right.
But yeah, so I think we're very lucky to have that in Kentucky. I think it does make the work, because look, we are a part-time legislature. I mean, most people there have other jobs and families, so we all will rely a lot on the LRC to make this work.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you said you've already filed some bills?
Yep. Some bill requests. So
okay.
They're
bill requests at this point because the legislature's not in session.
Yeah, and we don't pre-file bills anymore. So, but a couple of things. Listen, and I'll step back for a second. Even look, a lot of why I decided to run, what we talked about in the campaign, what I heard from constituents on the campaign trail. It's the daily cost of living, housing costs, transportation costs. I mean, those were clearly the top two issues in this district. and just, I'd hear time after time, like the real concern people have to make the rent or make a mortgage payment next month.
Right.
How to get to work, and again, the cost of owning a car has gone through the roof. Even, it's not just gas prices, but
insurance costs.
And while we're now taxing insurance.
Personal property tax.
Yeah, we're taxing insurance in Kentucky now. So,
yay.
Look, I mean, it's so I look at legislative actions that
Do Mustangs get a break since they're technically a horse?
Yeah.
Only in Damon Thayer's eyes.
Right? I mean, because, there's veterinary bills now.
I know.
If you own a horse, it don't count.
Yeah. But, so I looking at, one of the priorities of Republican supermajority has said they're going to take on is to continue to reduce our income tax, which, look, I think everyone likes paying less income tax. I mean, I do.
But that goes to like things that I also like policemen and fire departments.
But there is so, and I think that's where we're really running up against an issue here. The way we've reduced income tax in this state, or the income tax rate, has been by pushing the burden onto sales taxes, use taxes, all sorts of other fees that affect regular people, the working families of our community the most. So,
as long as we don't have taxes on boats and airplanes, that's
well, sure, yeah, and the stuff that does, the tax loopholes for the well-connected. I mean, that's just the reality of how we've done this over the last few years. And if there really is a push to get to 0%, and we're gonna, I don't know how that's possible, to be very honest with you.
Well, especially in Kentucky that doesn't have, in the states that do have that. These are states that typically have...
Well, they have much higher property taxes, much higher sales taxes,
but
they also kind of screw the tourists.
That's
places like
they have
Florida,
huge tourist taxes.
That's what I was
seen the hotel
say.
tax in Florida, and the fees they put on that. Again, I mean, you got to run the state somehow or another, and I'm interested in what's the fairest and most equitable way to fund our government.
Right.
And so, look, I mean, I if we are going to push the income taxes down, I am going to file a bill, and I will see where it goes with the Republican supermajority to go back to more of a progressive income tax, where like the first $30,000 that families make or individuals make, families would get $60,000 is 0% tax. So
that'd be great.
Instead of pushing from 4% down to 3.5%, let's take care of the regular people in the state first. If it truly is a priority to get to 0%, I'd like to prioritize the people that need that most. But so we'll see. And other things, again, just looking at, I will be filing a bill to get feminine products into schools.
Good for you.
Good, that's awesome.
There was a Senate bill that did get a favorable committee hearing last year, so there is some movement. It sounds like at least on the Senate side.
Do you know whose Senate bill that was? Off the top of your head,
I completely forget offhand.
Okay. But it just makes sense. I mean, period products, it's like there's toilet paper in all the bathrooms and nobody has to pay for that. So why aren't there period products? Right. I mean, it's kind of the same thing.
Because they don't affect boys.
Well, and look,
really?
Said, yeah.
You know how many times I've had to run out and buy period products for my kids because...
You are a grade A dad.
But, and I was a bit surprised when looking into this, just, the number of girls that miss school, because they can't afford it, and do so on a frequent basis. And then again, we're talking about very, very low cost types of solutions that can help with school attendance and and just basic dignity. So, those are the types of things I'll be looking at.
That's great.
And then look, obviously there's just the representative part of this job, and not just the legislative part. So, we have 7 cities, towns in here. I'll be formally meeting with all of the towns here, probably in the interim between January and February. Of course, every city has.
Now, are you still working out what that's going to look like, or?
Yeah. So, but it's so every town has some needs, whether it's financial or they all have a long list of very specific things they may need from the state, or assistance with the executive branch and some of the different cabinets. So that's already started. It is, when you really get into this job, and it's very different than campaigning.
Right.
There are very specific things that lots of your constituents are interested in or need, and again, basics stuff like stoplights on the AA highway in Cold Spring at certain
Right.
areas because that has developed like nobody thought it would, and it's it was
Or the Mary Ingalls Highway down
Yeah.
here past Dayton that keeps falling into the
it's just
river.
falling off the edge, and
Yeah.
the 4th Street Bridge, which is the legislature has allocated $90 million for that. Rachel Roberts worked really hard on that, so there is $90 million allocated. Now we're getting into design and execution phase of that, and make sure we're represented in that. I mean,
Good.
there's always an interesting balance when transportation cabinet is very interested in moving through large volumes of cars and trucks on Kentucky's
Right.
roads versus the impact on people who actually live where
Right.
these projects take place. And so,
I do. One of the things that's near and dear to my heart is public transportation as well as walkability and bikeability. And I've often ridden my bicycle across the 4th Street Bridge, and that is a harrowing
Yes, it is.
experience.
especially if there's another bicycle you're
Yeah.
trying to pass. I mean, well, you can't. I
Yeah.
mean, it's.
And-
So I'm excited. I mean, look, it's obviously a bridge that needs to get redone, and hopefully we can do this efficiently. But I mean, there's a lot of concern about, making sure this works for, not just Newport and Covington and the surrounding areas. I talked to the transportation cabinet about this, and, a lot of other people have, even before I've taken office, that it's not just how do we get as many cars through Covington and Newport as possible,
Right.
but this is a real economic development, quality of life opportunity for this part of
Right.
Campbell County and Kenton County.
And with the fire on the 471 bridge, now
yeah.
that being shut down, that's
Yes.
has definitely helped the
Wow.
traffic situation.
Yeah.
Not
Yes, and I do know. Yes, look, it's always interesting. A lot of the constituents, they for whatever reason, they go to the Newport City Commission, and man, they love to give them a hard time, like as if the Newport City Commission,
like Newport has anything to do with the.
But they get the brunt of it. But I mean, that bridge being out is. I mean, oh my God, they're talking about the cost of maintaining Newport's city roads is gone through. I mean, the number of 18-wheelers coming through Newport has gone through the roof. Coming
Right.
across the Taylor Southgate Bridge.
And those roads aren't built for that kind
No,
of traffic
not
of
at all.
semi-traffic.
No, and oh man.
Well, and it's got to be worse. Didn't they in recent years, if memory serves, and I'm not always sure that it does, didn't they increase the weight limit on
The 4th Street Bridge.
On just the expressways,
Oh,
which
They
I
had-
would think would include
they-
471.
They had increased on the expressways, but
Yeah.
there's the 4th Street Bridge. They actually
had to reduce
decreased.
it because
They
the
reduced.
the thing's gonna fall in the river soon.
At one point, they actually shut down one whole
Yeah.
lane until they could reinforce it
Yeah.
because
What is it with our area and bridges? Because I mean, we've also got.
it's not just our area;
No,
it's the
I
entire
know.
country.
I mean, they're
Well.
just old. I mean, it's
Right.
What else can you? I mean, it's a bridge well past its.
We haven't maintained the
Expected
infrastructure,
lifetime,
like especially on the interstate system. And I know I've talked about this before. If you go back to one of our old episodes, but it used to be when the interstate system was first created, it was 80% financed from the federal government, 20% financed from the state government. And now that is completely reversed. It's 20% if you're lucky from the federal government and 80% or more from the state government.
Yeah, and it's also a big issue. It's much more exciting, and politicians love to fund projects,
Right.
not maintenance. I mean, maintenance kind of
Maintenance
always
isn't
gets
sexy.
that really becomes a lower priority, and that is a problem. So
Yeah.
we do need to maintain these things.
But then
it's
when you
hard
have-
to find the money for it.
But when you have that imbalance happening of there's being more of the financial burden of maintaining our infrastructure is being pushed to the states. And then you have states like here in Kentucky where they're trying to reduce the taxes, raising less money that is used to actually repair and maintain that infrastructure. You
Something's
get
gotta
situations like the 4th Street
Yeah.
Bridge or the Brent Spence Bridge or
Well, and my fear too is the increase in the consumable taxes and fees and things that we pay. Like,
Yeah, I mean, the last thing it's also an interesting thing people don't think about as much is most of our, at least the federal highways, of which Kentucky is, the U.S. routes and the interstates, a lot of that was funded by the gas tax, and it still is. And strangely, as our cars have become much more fuel efficient, and even some of the EV, electric vehicles, that is actually it's been a struggle to maintain,
right? Because you're losing revenue.
We're losing revenue, maybe for good reasons, but we've got to figure out other ways to fund the maintenance of these roads.
Like I have an EV and fully electric. I haven't bought gas in 3 years.
Yeah,
I have no problem paying an additional surcharge to help maintain the roads, because even though I'm not buying gas, I still want a road that I can drive on. I don't want big potholes that my car's going to fall into.
That's
yeah. So I mean, look, it's a big. This is a big issue in our district. So Roberto's in my district. Ann is not, unfortunately. But, so I have to take care of Roberto.
I don't know.
Sorry, Ann. Sorry, Ann. Matt's taking care of me. You're out of luck.
But it is. I mean, there are big projects, big transportation questions. Like I said, and how to balance transportation and the increasing amounts of traffic coming through here with, quality of life for people living here. So,
and I think something that people might be interested in is, so like, let's say an issue comes up that you just don't already really know a lot about. How do you get up to speed on a new issue or a new situation?
Well, number one, Google. Life has gotten so easy in some ways, but talking to people. I mean, that I like to think I'm really good at just talking. Finding who does know. And there's obviously lots of lobbyists in Frankfurt, and I know lobbyists sound sometimes like a toxic word, but. There are legitimate interests that various groups have, and I think they're often a very good source of information about things you're not an expert on. So I do listen. Look, I haven't taken office yet, but I've been taking about 2 or 3 meetings a day through this, through December. Just every, different companies, different organizations, individuals. Like I said, the different municipalities in the district. I got to talk to also all the different schools. We have 5 school districts in our House district as well. So just.
So you've
Northern
been a little
Kentucky
bit.
Your district's really interesting because you've got not just the county systems, but there's multiple independent school districts in your district.
Independent school districts. We've got NKU as the largest employer in the district. So so again, just trying to find time to meet with these different groups and hear what's going on and what's actually needed or not needed.
Right.
I don't. There's no real shortcut other than just talking and listening. And listening. So,
No, I think that's great. And I know, your predecessor, Rachel, I think was really, really good at listening to people and making time and space for people to share their concerns and their suggestions and their ideas. How helpful is it for you? Like, let's say there's something I don't like. Mm-hmm. Is it better for me to just go, I don't like this, fix it, or I don't like this, but here's a way I think we might be able to fix this?
Well, listen, I think that's a good life lesson. I'm always appreciative of, when people have a problem, what are potential solutions to that problem? Mm-hmm. Listen, I'm one of 100 in the House of Representatives. There's not a lot I'm going to be able to wave a magic wand and make something perfect, but I think potential solutions are always very much appreciated, even though they may not be realistic or practical or achievable. That's just, like I said, I'm in the minority and 1 out of 100. So,
right.
But like I said, I think I met a number of my colleagues already in the House. I think there's something politicians definitely like to talk. And
we haven't
noticed. But I do think there's a certain type of politician that comes in with an ideology. And everything is, they know it all already, or every decision gets made through a prism of an ideology they already have established.
Yeah.
I know no politicians like that.
That's the stuff.
Liar, pants on fire.
That just doesn't work for me. And so, yes, I'm a listener. I like to think I'm very pragmatic and open-minded. And that's how I will be approaching this job.
Yeah.
So I'm
That's
very
my
open
favorite P word. Pragmatic.
Pragmatic.
I love that word.
That politics is all about pragmatism.
Yeah.
I mean,
it just is.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially, look, it happens on the right, it happens on the left. There's a time and place for activism. There's a time and place for single issue group. Politics and legislatures are not real good at activism. It's horse trading and, the art of the possible.
Exactly. The art of the possible. It's like, let's fashion something that we all kind of get what we're looking for, but it's maybe not what either of us really wanted at the end, but at least we got something that's workable and livable and everybody kind of can benefit from this. And I think that's the way, I think that's the way our system was set up from the beginning.
That's exactly
that's why the founder,
Right.
that's why the founders set it up that way,
Right.
was to make it so that compromise and working together was required to get anything passed. And when you get people who are just so dogmatic and like, no, it's this or nothing, that's when we get a gridlock system that doesn't work.
Yeah, correct. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but we do have, I think both at the federal level and at state level, we're starting to see a lot of this across the nation. I don't know why. It's social media.
Starting to see what in
Just
particular?
more of this ideologically driven purity. And you see it with, there's activist groups out there that grade, even in the endorsement process, you get all these questionnaires. It's like, if you're not 100% with this, we don't endorse you.
Right.
Like, I didn't do a lot of those.
We've talked about purity.
Yeah. In our first podcast, we talked about purity and how
It's annoying.
we need to get past purity politics.
but that happens on the right as well.
It happens everywhere.
And it's like I said, so but I don't know if it's just social media bubbles that people get into, but we do have, I feel like, I haven't done a scientific study of this, but it does feel like there's a rise of this on both sides where we're getting kind of activist-oriented legislators that, again, have just sort of these predefined ideologies that won't compromise on anything, and you just get stuck.
Yeah.
Gridlock.
And I think we need to, and what we've talked about several times, particularly this season on the podcast, is how we need to become more issue focused than tribe focused or party focused. And it's like, look, if we agree on this issue, it doesn't matter whether we have an R or a D or an I or an L or whatever after our name. If we agree on an issue, let's work together on this issue.
Yeah.
Right. Those alliances of it only has to be temporary. It doesn't have to mean you're married for life.
Exactly.
You come together, you deal with this issue, everybody's happy, and then you break apart and you go deal with the next issue.
Exactly. And I think we've seen that on the national level, right? With this last presidential election where you had, Trump, as much as I hate to say it, going on podcasts with people where he probably doesn't agree with 80% of what they say, but on a particular issue, it's like, we're together on this and we're good on this. And honestly, that's part of politics, the art of the possible, right? We're together on this issue. We agree on this issue. Let's get together and talk about this issue. And that doesn't mean that I endorse the other 90% of what you stand for. It just means on this issue, we're on the same page.
Right.
Yeah.
But we could use some more Democrats. I can do what I can do. We're still
No, true that.
Listen. It is a tough map. It was gerrymandered by the Republicans, and they controlled it the last redistricting cycle. So it is a very tough map in Kentucky. Yeah. But I think our state would be better. And I've even talked to, at this point, enough Republicans that actually agree with me that some balance would be very appreciated, because again, there is a reward mechanism now in the Republicans. To say the craziest stuff and file the craziest bills and just accomplish nothing, but they keep getting there's a few in Northern Kentucky, but they're around. really accomplish anything. I mean, so it's we have a lot of people just
right, but their name
occupying-
shows up XYZ amount of
they're-
times.
They're
and-
very good at using it in social media and saying, again, outrageous things and filing bills that don't even get assigned to a committee, much less heard in a committee. They just, and it goes on. So it wastes everyone's time. And there's 45,000 people that don't really have effective representation when you have a representative like this in these districts. So I think it would be a much, much healthier situation if Democrats were a little closer to 35 or 40.
Right.
Where you could even, help sustain a veto or things like that. Because those are the types of mechanisms that force more compromise and force, you can get some Democratic priority, even if you're still not in the majority, but you can, you have some leverage.
And I think that's the dangerous point, right? Because now we got super majorities, both houses. They could basically, even if the governor vetoes something, there's the period after the veto window that the legislature can come back and they can override. And with the super majorities in both houses, they can basically override anything that the governor vetoes.
I think last session, and I don't have the numbers, I think there were 20 vetoes, give or take, and I think only one stood. So they overrode 19 out of 20 or something like that.
Well, but you also have, and I'm sure to a certain extent it's going to stay that way. I mean, it was very clear from the outset that, and Damon Thayer said as much, basically the Mitch McConnell of the Kentucky legislature, that his job, his goal was to not let Beshear get anything that he wanted, the same way that McConnell did with Obama. So, and that's not governing.
No. It's just obstructionism.
Well, obstructionism, authoritarian, whatever you want to call it. It's absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah, and they're using it in such a way that, people are actually suffering because of it, despite the tribal mentality. My question for you is this. I got a good one.
Okay.
I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah, okay. Maybe. Because this is, again, something that we've talked about, so it's great to have, a legislator elect to speak with about it. In recent years, and this has happened during our time here, I believe, the law was changed to eliminate, what's the word I'm looking for? Public... if you want to get a bill backed by the public, you have to get so many signatures.
Referendum?
Referendum.
Jesus.
Yeah.
It's one of those days. To get it on the ballot, right? For example, and the one that we talk about all the time is that in the state of Kentucky, of the 120 counties, there are only 15 counties that continue to have this ridiculous county government of judge, executive, and 3 typically
magistrates or
the commissioners.
Magistrates depend what
right.
county.
Whereas everybody else, 105 counties have the magistrate districts.
Right.
Of those 15 counties, 8 of them
are in northern Kentucky.
Congressional District 4. So what can we do to have more effective county government, which I know a boatload of people who have talked about, to have a more representative...
Including a bunch of our libertarian friends.
To have more representative government at the local levels, the county level. What can we do?
That's a good question. I'll be honest, I don't know. I mean, I
told you you'd like it.
That is a good question.
That's a good question. I don't know legally.
I mean,
do we... look it up. I don't know if that's... I assume it's something that the county itself decides, but I don't know the mechanism for that. I don't know if it's the fiscal court itself decides. I don't know. I'd have to look. Now you got me interested.
No, this has been an important. This has been an important.
See, you're sorry you don't represent me now.
No, this has been an important issue for us for years.
Yes, it has.
That why is it this way? It should be the same way across the entire state. Either it's magistrate districts or it's county commissioners.
Well, and it's so when you look at Northern Kentucky in particular,
right?
it is so expensive
Yeah.
to run an election where, even though, and I know the most about Kenton County, but
Right.
I think they're all the same, where they're split into 3, right?
Yeah.
3 districts. And yet you still have to run to the entire county,
Right.
not just your district. And what's really interesting in Kenton County is our 3 commissioners, they're in 3 different districts, and you could get to each one of their houses within 5 minutes of each other.
Right.
What the heck?
Yeah.
They're
But just the fact that you represent a portion of the county, but you're elected by the entire county,
Right.
makes no bloody sense.
right. This is why and what it would open up for Kenton County in particular, when it comes to Covington and Independence and all the growth in those areas and the number of magistrate districts that would provide for Kenton County, where you have better neighborhood representation, like I said, at the local level within the county government, where people know, hey, these people down on, in XYZ area have this issue.
Right.
So on and so forth. And then you don't have to run, people don't have to run to the entire county either. You only have to run an election that covers your magistrate district, which opens it up.
Every other level of representation we have in this state is the person who runs for your district lives in your district and runs in your district. This is the only level where county commissioners have to run outside of the district they live in.
Oh, interesting. I didn't think of it that way.
To be fair, Matt had no idea we were going to bring this up.
You could also say, you can't gerrymander these things. I don't know about that. So I think there's an argument for, we used to have what they call at-large congressional districts. Even in Kentucky, we had this where the whole state would vote.
Right.
We'd have districts, but then there was a whole statewide.
Yeah, we did away with that because it was stupid.
Yeah, I think I don't know.
Tell me he doesn't look like a little boy.
A little boy. Well, I'm just thinking about this.
It's cute.
I don't know. Yeah, I think there's I actually do think there's arguments for both types of things. One, again, because you can't gerrymander those, so you end up. In some ways, they're a little more They are representative of the county as a whole, not just the. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about this.
Yeah, if they're representative of the county as a whole, then fine.
Yeah, but it tends to. Those also then tend to be kind of very insular political cliques.
Right.
That all work with each other.
Right, and they've all, let's face it, they've all
Exactly.
held office up here for 100 years.
Bazillion years.
Yeah. And if you look at,
since I still had hair.
Well, if you look at a picture of a map of Kenton County, I'm going to use that one as an example. The districts kind of run in strips from north to south. So all 3 of them represent, a portion that covers entirely from north to south, yet all 3 of them live in the extreme north. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you can't tell me you know shit from Shinola about what's going down in, the furthest parts, the most southern parts of Kenton County.
And for our listeners who aren't in the Boone, Kenton, Campbell area, the northern parts of those counties tend to be very populated, urban, suburban, and the southern parts of those counties tend to be very rural, farm-based.
Right.
And very different constituents, very different interests.
Right. Why shouldn't they have their own voice at the table?
Absolutely.
The guy, I just envision going back in time to when, government was being built, and one of the most, the guy who owned the corner store, Mr. Olson.
Mr. Olson.
Right? Everybody would vote for him because he knows everybody and he's friendly with everybody and he, wants to take care of everybody, this, that, and the other thing. But that person today, even in that position where the person who owns the corner store can't afford to run to the entire county.
No.
Doesn't know anything outside of a general.
Yeah, I mean,
General
look, these
region.
counties are a lot bigger than.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
like, what's Kenton County is 100 and what's the population now? 125 or so.
Something like that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
And they,
I
but
just,
compared to Oldham County, which I know you're familiar with, who they have magistrate districts.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now you got me thinking about it. I don't know. I'll have to do a little more research.
Score
into it,
one
but
for Ann.
that's
we went
it.
we went
You,
off on a little turn there.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I didn't mean it to be a
But,
gotcha. I really
yeah.
didn't.
So so you talked about some of the bills that you've requested because they
Correct.
don't pre-file anymore. I always got to keep up on the new terminology, right?
Yeah.
For real.
So I guess you know, people in your district, and I guess districts in general. What's the best way for them to contact you, to reach out to you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so once I do get an email and a phone number and office assignment, it will be on the legislative website. So
Okay.
my phone number. I mean, I also have my campaign website and phone numbers on there as well, and email. So we can.
What's your campaign website?
Lehmanforkentucky.org.
Okay.
LEHMAN. Number 4, Kentucky spelled out .org.
Gotcha.
And you can find contact, through my campaign. But then
And
once
if
I
you
take
go to-
office, it'll be on the LRC website.
Yeah, if you go to the LRC website, which is legislature.ky.gov, once all that information is out there, you'll be able to. There's actually a "Who's My Representative" tool on the website where you can just punch in your zip code, and it'll be like, "Oh, here's your state representative. Here's
Right.
your state senator. Here's."
That was a great resource out knocking doors too, when
Yeah.
people didn't know. And
Yeah.
you'd be like,
Yeah.
There you go.
And just so you know, on the federal level, the Congress.gov has the same sort of thing where you can punch in where you are, and they'll tell you who your federal representative and federal senator is. So those are great resources. Definitely suggest you use those.
so before we head out or anything else, I have to ask you a federal level
Federal
question.
question.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, well, because you ran against Massey in the past. This bipolarism he has, we've talked about it before, where he loves Trump, hates Trump, loves Trump, hates Trump. It's this revolving door. And we know, because we've seen it in the past, and I know we've talked about it, where when it's an election year where he doesn't have anybody to run against, he cray-cray. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
he goes off the chain and does and says whatever he wants to do. And then when it's a year when he considers that the opposition is possibly serious, then he calms down again. What's your take on him now?
Wow.
I think I've made a lot of my. Obviously, talked a lot about this
Stop.
even a couple years ago. I mean, when I talk about it, the one thing if I'm going to give him credit for, he's kind of honest. I mean, he tells you this is his ideology. He kind of adheres to it,
Right.
for the most part. I mean, he clearly does. There is a base. He's got a strong base of, not just in the district, but frankly nationwide. I always found it very interesting that even from a fundraising perspective and Twitter follower, whatever you want to define,
North Carolina, Montana, and Texas.
his
Yeah.
following is he's got a really strong base that just kind of likes this. He doesn't call himself a libertarian necessarily
Anymore.
but that kind of aligned,
Right.
I've also learned. I mean, the reality. Look, I think I just, and you know me long, and I just ideologies and labels, I think, are just, they don't work. Because again,
It's more complex
You've
than
just
that.
come into some office and you've said, because you have your ideology, you've already decided everything. So the reason he votes no on everything is because it doesn't adhere to an ideology. And I think there's I don't want to be rude or disrespectful. There's a real ego that comes along with that. That you basically, this plan, whatever this ideology is that I believe in has all the answers,
Right.
and I'm right on everything. I don't think he's not a big listener because the
What?
answers are already there.
Right.
And, so look, it's and on one hand, look, he's run several times. I mean, 6 times, I think, now, and he's won.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it hasn't been particularly close in several elections that, he obviously was uncontested this year. I do think, look, it's some of this may be an indictment of how we elect, when we get back to, we're talking about magisterial districts, but, the way this has been gerrymandered, over the years, it's a, overwhelmingly Republican district.
And there's a live interactive map where you can watch from the very beginning
how it's it was look. I mean, a bit of the history.
crazy.
This was originally when Kentucky was dominated by Democrats. This district was originally gerrymandered by the Democrats to try to put all the Republicans in one district. So for Gene Snyder. So just in fairness, the legacy of this starts when they were trying to
gerrymandering sucks no matter which
party you're. But it was intended by the Democrats to put all the Republicans in one place. And minimize how many seats they could add in Congress back, when Gene Snyder was in office.
Right.
But it's gotten a little worse over it. So even though, before the last redistricting, it was a bit more competitive than it is now. So it's hard. I mean, it's hard for a Democrat certainly to overcome, just the reality of elections. Or, there is a persuadable group. I mean, typically it's 4 or 5% of an election. Unless there's some overt corruption or notorious some scandal, it really takes a lot.
Right.
To the persuadable middle's not big. It hasn't really been big for a long time in this country. So that's what you're working with. It's how do you get people to turn out on your side? How do you work on the 4 to 5% persuadable? And you add those numbers together in the 4th district, you're still short.
Right. I think,
and as long as as long as Representative Massey keeps winning the Republican primary, and again, for what he seems to be. The one thing is he seems to be honest. He does present who he is. Never really a hint of any serious scandal involving him or his office. So it's hard. I mean, that's a hard. Even though, like I said, I on so many issues, I think, all three of us would just, frankly, when you get down to issues, the number of Republicans that, Northern Kentucky that just disagree with him.
Right.
And think
he brings nothing to help Kentucky. He just votes no on everything.
Yeah. And but there's, when you start to get into these partisan races, you have to be realistic. There's a lot of voters, I always hate this low information. I just think regular people who have jobs and they'll read the news, or
who don't breathe and eat politics like we do.
And frankly, they're far more interested in outcomes than the process. It's costs are higher or lower. My neighborhood's safer. My kid's school is safe. And if you're feeling okay, you'll tend to go with the incumbent or show up. Or if you're too busy and you don't like your candidate, you don't show up. I mean, that's where most of these elections are won and lost. And so it's just hard, it's to get a Republican not to vote for Thomas Massey, who's your average voter, and he's a Republican, and they're like, I'm kind of okay with what's going on, and it's really hard to overcome that.
Well, and I think we were talking about earlier before the show that Andy Beshear probably the most Republican favorable Democratic candidate we've had. Yet in District 4, he
came up just short. I think it was 47, 48%.
Yeah, 47, 48%.
That's probably the high water. I mean, it is the high water mark for a Democrat.
Right.
These days, listen. I mean, but nothing stays the same forever.
Right.
And I think that's it. You can overanalyze this. So yes, I'm saying all this. I would very much encourage people to continue to run in races that on paper don't look winnable. Listen, I mean, it sounds crazy. There was and I don't mean to make light of the situation, but there was a Republican senator who died earlier this year. I mean, if we had a Democrat on the ballot, we could have, we would have won that race. instead it went into some weird, write-in campaign. But I'm just saying, stuff happens, things change, scandals do happen. I mean, not all Republicans are honest brokers.
Not all Democrats
not
are
all
honest
Democrats
reporters.
are either, but I mean, so I think competing. I mean, some of this stuff it's even if you lose elections, you have to hold incumbents accountable. You have to make them talk about why they're voting or what they're doing on certain issues. And you do that by running credible campaigns.
Yeah.
And again, even if you lose, you
Here,
force.
here.
I mean,
But just no seat unopposed.
and frankly, sometimes you get lucky.
Right.
I mean, or like I said, sometimes, oh my God, there is this corruption. I mean, I talked to back when I did run for Congress, and I want to get a name, but it was funny. Like there was a Democrat. He ran in a seat in Florida, very similar to what I was doing. He said, it's really hard. And he's like, 3 months before the election, we found out my opponent was a pedophile. I mean, it sounded crazy. It's like nobody knew this. He's like, if I didn't run, this wouldn't. First of all, it wouldn't have come out, and this guy would have stayed in office. There's. Again, I'm not implying that anyone in office in Kentucky is, but there are people that probably do need to be challenged. Their ideas need to be challenged, their positions on issues. And again, I'm sure there is just some, if you're running unopposed cycle after cycle, I mean,
there's nobody checking.
You know what? I'm sure there's some corruption going on in some of these places.
When I ran in District 66 back in 2018, it had been over 20 years since a Democrat had run against the Republican in that position.
Yeah. So I think it's healthy. I mean, I encourage Democratic primaries. People are like, we shouldn't. I think it's. It's a way to discuss.
That's how we
ideas.
get the better candidates.
Yes, that's how you get good candidates, better candidates. You flesh out ideas. You get name recognition. So I would encourage at every federal, state, county, municipal. I think contested elections are a very important part of democracy. I mean, it relies on contested elections. I mean, that's the nature of the way our government works. And
that's great. Yeah, I totally agree.
I hope anyone listening gives it a chance.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard work, and it's hard when you're going to run in a race that you're probably not going to win. I mean, I don't want to say never, but it is hard. Yeah.
And it has knock-on effects throughout the state. It's if you're opposing a candidate in this district that otherwise would not have been opposed, that means that one, that candidate at least has to pay attention in this district. And two, it means that that candidate doesn't have as much time to spend helping other candidates throughout the district. I mean, that's one of the things that Andy Beshear told me when he was Attorney General and I was running. He was like, Roberto, you may not win your district, but the fact that you're there means that they have to focus at that and that your opponent doesn't have time to go to other districts and help those other districts. And that becomes a big thing.
Yeah.
So,
I agree. Like I said, and any listener, I mean, I know Ann's been involved, you've both been involved in a lot of elections. I've now been involved in a few, but, I think there's a lot of people that support you and help and give advice. And it is good to hear. I've had people reach out to me already about thinking about running in 2 years for different state legislative offices. But when you talk about I think running in the county levels, I mean, look, counties in Kentucky are very important, especially when we're in counties as large as we are in northern Kentucky. That's where a lot of the budget is. That's where a lot of the real decisions affecting your daily life are made. So I do think that's important, and get involved. Again, sometimes the only other, if we're talking about advice, this is something I did learn, and I've watched carefully. Is I would also say to become much more involved in. And not to say people aren't, but think about organizations you should get involved in outside of politics. My theory right now of, let's say, Northern Kentucky is on the issues, it's a pretty Democratic leaning place. So when you look at, the abortion amendment that went down 2 years ago, the school choice thing, or the public money going to private school thing, that amendment went down in flames. The medical cannabis that was on the ballot, everywhere it was on the ballot, it won by won by 70%. I mean, they weren't close.
No, yeah.
So these had kind of been Democratic priorities that we can't get through the legislature.
Right.
But when you actually ask the voters, that's what they want.
Right.
See, that's another reason we need to have referendums.
Right.
But that's the next podcast. But no, but this disconnect, and I've spent a lot of time thinking, why is there this disconnect? And I think, and I've been told that a lot of voters, it's trust. For whatever reason, the trust that the average person has in the Democratic Party is not there. Mm-hmm. And again, whether that's affected by national perception or it's affected by Republican propaganda, whatever, but it's true. I mean, it is. I've heard this enough, and enough people have told me, and I've seen the evidence of it. There's a belief that Democrats will you can't trust them, they'll go too far. You give them an inch, they'll take a mile. We don't. We'd like reproductive rights, but those Democrats that I see, those California, they're going to have post-birth abortion. So it's like they want this, but they don't trust electing Democrats. So I think that's what we have to think of, is how to gain the trust of people. And we're talking about Northern Kentucky.
Right.
And I think it's not done, it's not, look, there's a lot of things that can be done, but it's probably just getting involved in organizations that are sort of different or out of your comfort zone. Get involved with the KET Foundation. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a Northern Kentucky branch of that. There's a lot of interesting people there. NKU, different organizations there. Get involved, Chamber of Commerce. There's just, and encouraging people to get involved. It expands your personal network. And I think that's what we've struggled with a lot of Democratic candidates is not they're good people. They do what they do. They're living their lives. They, maybe they're a teacher or they're a nurse. They're well known in that profession, or their kids' school. But you've got to start building a network that's broader than, like I said, your comfort zone. Yeah. And frankly, Republicans do a good job of this in Northern Kentucky. I mean, if you look at some of the nonprofit boards or the community foundations, they're also pretty dominated by Republicans, and so there's a lot of I would really strongly encourage people to get much more involved in these, and
that's great
because it's building trust in your community. That yes, you're a Democrat. Yes, I probably agree with a lot of value, and I trust that you're not going to go too far, and we're not going to.
Right.
Again, whatever the perception of was when Democrats go too far, this happens, but that it's a real bias out there. So.
Great. Well, we appreciate you being with us today.
Yes,
taking time out.
This was fun.
Yeah, had a good time.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll get to talk to you at some point during the session, maybe during the break or something. Probably not quite this long, maybe, but you might be busy.
All right, yeah. I hope I'm busy.
I hope you're busy too.
Yes.
So we really appreciate it. Again, if you guys want to reach out to Matt, you can go to his campaign website. We'll have that linked in the description. I also have the legislature.ky.gov, the LRC site linked in the description. And once they actually decide to give him an email address and stuff, and phone number, you'll be able to.
We'll provide that too.
You'll be able to reach out to him. So yeah, thanks, Matt. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roberto.
Thanks.
Thanks, Anne.
Till next week, this is Roberto Henriquez.
And Dickerson.